I'm planning a trip with your grandparents, I said. What about you? Do you have any plans? I called my son Anthony after my in-laws invited us on a vacation. I have practice, so you all should go and have fun. But isn't this trip a bit out of the ordinary? Are you okay, Mom? I'll manage. I'll bring you back a souvenir. Work hard at your practice. Ensign, under my influence, has always been into marathon running. He even got into college on a running scholarship. He studies at a nearby university but stays in the dorms to save commuting time, coming home only during long holidays. I knew he couldn't join the trip, but I thought I should at least ask him. His response was exactly what I anticipated. My name is Flora, a 46-year-old working woman. My husband, Steve, is 4 years older and was once my boss. He's competent, and I respect him. After our marriage and the birth of our son, we built a happy family. Yet somewhere along the way, our relationship began to break down. The root cause: my husband's parents, especially his mother, who had a problem with me from the moment we married and has been bullying me ever since. Initially, Steve stood up for me, and because we lived far away from his parents, we seldom met them and managed to get by. But when our son, who loves marathoning, wanted to attend a high school near my in-laws, things changed. The reason he got into running was me. I used to run marathons and still do occasionally. It made me happy to see him take an interest in running just like me, so I convinced Steve to move closer to the high school my son wanted to attend. Steve applied for a transfer at work for our son's sake, and we moved. My son was recommended for his university from this high school, so I think it worked out well. Go get the rental car tomorrow morning and pick up my parents on your way back, Steve said the day before our trip. This left me confused. Huh? Why am I the one renting the car? What are you going to do? I'm tired from work, so I'll sleep until the last minute. Once you pick up my parents, come back, and I'll take over from there. It's in the same direction as our destination anyway. I could understand what he was saying, but if anything, I was more exhausted. Despite working similar hours, I was the one taking care of all the housework. When I think about it, we used to split the household chores equally. However, ever since we moved closer to his parents, they've been visiting us frequently. When his mother saw Steve doing housework, she vehemently opposed it. Housework is the wife's job. It's not something the breadwinner should do. Isn't that right, Flora? Overwhelmed by her intensity, I initially nodded in agreement. This continued until Steve eventually stopped doing anything around the house. It was partly Steve's fault, but I believe the main cause was his mother. Moreover, Steve started to echo his mother's sentiment, saying, I am the breadwinner every now and then. By that time, it was too late for me to correct the situation, and I didn't even feel like trying anymore. Steve changed drastically over the past few years. His work performance seemed to have declined, and he frequently vented his frustrations on me. However, I realized that arguing back was more trouble than it was worth, so I decided to simply accept things as they are. That's the least stressful way for me to live. There were times I considered getting a divorce, but when it came time for our son's college recommendation, I feared it could disadvantage him if we were a single-parent family, so I couldn't go through with the divorce. Instead, I tricked my mind into believing I was taking care of a dog, not a person, and surprisingly, it did relieve some of my stress. So I began to feel like it wasn't worth expending my energy on getting a divorce, and that's how I've arrived at where I am today. The reason I agreed to join this trip was because it was to a resort that I absolutely love. I knew I could thoroughly enjoy myself even if I ended up doing things alone. Heck, I was even ready to do things separately from my in-laws and husband. Perhaps I was invited mainly because they needed someone to share the driving, but both my husband and my father-in-law can drive, so it'll work out one way or another. Anyway, I played along with the notion that our pampered pooch was being demanding again, went to get the rental car as my husband instructed, and headed to my in-laws' place. Flora, you're late. Is that the car for today? You should have rented a bigger one. Well, it's better than your tiny car at least. The car we usually use is the one I bought since I drive to work. I assumed I would be the primary user and I pay for it myself. We don't go out of town often, so I thought a small car would be just fine. I loved its interior design and color, so I bought it. Yet my husband would take it without asking and even let his parents ride in it. My in-laws complained about the car being small and looked down on me as if I could only afford a small car. I thought they could just use my father-in-law's car for the trip. However, he didn't like others driving his car and didn't want to drive it himself for the entire trip, So we ended up renting a car. Even so, I wasn't consulted about any of this. I just found out that I would be the one to pick up the rental car and drive it, with them in the back seat the whole time. It made me want to tell them to drive themselves. In a word, they are tiresome. In the end, my husband, who had said he would take turns driving, slept the entire time. My father-in-law didn't want to drive unless it was his own car, so I ended up driving all the way to our destination. With my husband asleep, my father-in-law kept criticizing my driving. He would say things like, "You could have turned left there," even though an oncoming car was obviously approaching, or "Why didn't you go," even though the light was turning red. It was nothing but unnecessary stress. My mother-in-law joined in, saying, "Flora, your driving is as bad as ever." I didn't want to be criticized by a woman who can't even drive. At least I'm better than my father-in-law, who, as far as I know, has crashed his car at least 5 times. Despite being told he should surrender his license before causing a major accident, my mother-in-law kept insisting it was just bad luck and that he is a good driver. Well, I didn't want to ride in a car driven by my father-in-law anyway. I don't mind driving, but I'd appreciate it if they could stop interfering all the time. Upon reaching our destination, my husband finally woke up. Since we had been in the car all day and were tired, we followed my in-laws' wish to spend the day relaxing in the hotel, so we didn't go out. I enjoyed myself by swimming in the pool and exploring the hotel. It was a fulfilling time. After having dinner and going to the spa, I returned to find my husband already asleep. I didn't know what my in-laws were doing in the next room, but they were probably asleep too. I had a beer in the room before crawling into bed. I woke up in the fresh morning air. My husband was still asleep, and with some time until breakfast, I decided to take a morning stroll. But when I came back, the unthinkable had happened. Upon entering the room, my husband was nowhere to be found. Shocked, I scanned the room. His luggage was also missing. I stepped out and rang the doorbell to my in-laws' room next door, but there was no answer. When I went to the front desk to inquire, I was told my husband and in-laws had already finished breakfast. Though they had told me breakfast was at 8:30, it seems they actually reserved it an hour earlier, exactly when I had gone for my walk. On top of that, I was left to check out. Did that mean my mother-in-law's offer to pay for our stay was a lie? With no other option, I paid for both rooms and left the hotel. Of course, there was no car. As I was pondering what to do next, my cell phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. "Where are you now?" When I asked that, my mother-in-law started laughing. "We're having quality time as a family since we're on vacation." "Oh, is that so? Well then, why didn't you just come as 3 from the start instead of leaving me behind?" "Well, you wanted to come here, didn't you, Flora? That's why we brought you along." I remembered mentioning how I wanted to visit this resort a while back, while watching TV with my husband. Is that what he remembered? Usually it would be nice if he remembered what I casually said, but this time it was used just to annoy me. Moreover, I was the one who did most of the driving to get here. Why do I have to hear that I was brought here by my mother-in-law, who never drove nor paid? I was past the point of anger and could only sigh. "All right then, we'll go sightseeing as a family and head home first. You do some sightseeing too, Flora, and come back. We don't know how you'll get back, but you're good at marathons, aren't you? Just run back," my mother-in-law mocked. At her laughter, my anger exploded. "Is Steve driving? Put me on speakerphone so he can hear me." When I said that, it seemed my mother-in-law switched over, and I could hear my husband's voice. "Good morning. You wanted to come here, didn't you? Take it easy today, but remember there's laundry from the trip to be done. Make sure you wash it by tomorrow morning." He sounded cheerful. I had no more feelings for him. "Do your own laundry." "Hey, that's no way to talk. I'm the breadwinner, and telling you to take it easy today. You should be saying thank you." "Oh right, the breadwinner. But don't worry, this is the last time we'll see each other. Well, all you've really seen of me is me sleeping." "What do you mean? We need to come home today. There's laundry and house cleaning to be done." "Yeah, that's why I'm not going back." "What are you talking about?" His voice was shaken. "I'm getting a divorce. You told me half a year ago, didn't you, that you met your soulmate, your childhood friend, and you were going to marry her? You reunited when she moved back to your hometown, right? The childhood friend who had divorced. Remember you showed me the divorce papers?" About 6 months ago, I confronted my husband because something felt off, and he came clean. He had met his childhood friend and decided she was his soulmate. He wanted to divorce me and remarry her. She had a middle school-aged child and was struggling as a single mother, and he wanted to support her. So he asked me for a divorce. Truthfully, I had lost my feelings for my husband, but I wasn't quite ready to say, okay, let's get a divorce. He gave me the pre-filled divorce papers, but I didn't agree to divorce. We didn't speak for a few days after that, but when I stopped doing the household chores, he was in a bind. A few days later, he said, forget about what I said before. Well, I couldn't just forget it, and I started gathering evidence of his infidelity. Could it be that Steve planned this trip to get on my good side? I mused. The conversation happened about 3 months ago. It was right after you quit your job, I said. Surprised voices from my in-laws on the other end of the speakerphone echoed. This must have been the first time they heard about their son quitting his job. When you said you were quitting your job, I told you it would be hard to get a new job, and I disagreed with your reason, right? I recalled you said that you were an excellent worker and would find a new job right away, but you only found a part-time job. I wonder when you'll find a proper job. My husband was driving and staying quiet, so I took the opportunity to spill everything. I've been coping with stress by imagining you as a dog, but then I thought I might as well get an actual dog, I declared. So I'll submit the divorce papers. Enjoy your family vacation. My in-laws were calling my name in shock, and my husband was trying to say something, but I cut the call without paying any attention. I decided to enjoy sightseeing before heading home. When I explained the situation over the phone to my son, he said, I told you. Well, if you're divorcing, that's fine, Anson said. His reaction was lighter than I expected, given he knew the situation. After returning from the trip, I didn't go home. I had been keeping mine Anson's belongings in a self-storage unit, ready for any situation. With only the bare necessities with me, I dragged my suitcase to a real estate agency. The sales representative, a woman of my generation and someone I'd had drinks with a few times, greeted me. Over those drinks, I'd often complained about my husband and in-laws and asked her to always keep an eye on available properties just in case. That day, I signed a contract for my own place. Feeling relieved, I decided to submit the divorce papers at City Hall. The divorce was granted without any issue. Finally, I returned the countless calls my husband had made. Hello, I started. The divorce papers have been accepted. We are now officially strangers. My husband's panicked voice echoed through the phone. Are you serious about the divorce? I broke up with her. Now, there's only you. You didn't like me looking at other women, right? Now I'm only looking at you, so come back without worries. But all I felt for his words was revulsion. What are you talking about? I never intended to please you in the first place. And you didn't break up with her, did you? You were dumped because you couldn't find a job and had no money, right? It turned out that my husband's mistress was a friend of the sales rep who had introduced us to her new place. Talk about a small world. She had been listening to complaints about my husband from the mistress who claimed to be his current girlfriend. Apparently, after he quit his job and started working part-time, she saw no point in being with him and broke up. But a fling is a fling. I'm definitely going to demand compensation. Compensation? I told you, we broke up. Now there's only you. I could only sigh at this point. So you're saying that now that you're single, you're thinking of having another affair? I don't care what you do, but I'm done being exploited. You didn't even notice that your stuff at home was missing because you didn't care, did you? I'm not going back, so throw away what you don't need. With that, I hung up the phone. Even after that, my ex-husband kept calling me, and even my former in-laws reached out. But of course, I'm never going back to that house. My ex-husband still hasn't found a job, can't pay the rent, and has moved back in with his parents. My ex-father-in-law is still driving dangerously and recently crashed into a neighbor's fence with my ex-mother-in-law in the car. Fortunately, no one else was injured, but they didn't have property insurance and had to borrow money to cover the repair costs. All of this was written in emails that my ex-husband kept sending me on his own. I find his misfortune slightly amusing. I don't reply, but I haven't blocked his emails either, just quietly enjoying the show. Since I moved to a pet-friendly property, I started keeping a small dog and realized that I enjoy taking care of a dog more than taking care of people. My son, worried about me being alone, has started coming over on weekends, a change from his previous habit of only visiting on long holidays. I'm living a fulfilling life every day. Maybe this weekend, I'll go back to that resort town for the first time in a while.